much less air.
It's thinned out a lot. You can tell in the video for sure.
So I was doing makeup.
We don't have enough time for makeup.
So what's the purpose of this? What is your objective, Mr. Mafia?
I mentioned to you that when I did a video for, and I'm recording now, by the way. We're here with Larry Kostmayer. What's your middle name?
Jose.
Joseph. Can you say your social security number?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Larry, we're going to do a video of you, and I just want to ask you a few questions so that we could pass it on and keep it in prosperity for the family. Tell us about your childhood, where you grew up, and siblings, parents.
Well, I was born in Philadelphia. Don't remember. Moved to New York when I was, I think, 2 or 3. My mother, Hope, and my biological father, Siggy, split up when I was very young, and when my mom came to New York with myself and my older sister, Gwen. And so that's my childhood. No. Moved to New York, moved to several different apartments in the city, one in Queens, one down in the Village, one on the Upper East Side, in the dungeon was what we called it. And then in 1966, we found an apartment at 801 West End Avenue on 99th and West End in this old pre-war building. And that is where I grew up. 801 West End Avenue. And my mother and my father, Kos, married in maybe 1964, something like that. And Kos adopted Gwen and myself, and then knocked my mom up, and had my younger sister Samantha. So I've got 2 siblings, Samantha and Gwen. Samantha's 6 years younger than me. Gwen is 3 years older. And growing up in New York in 801 and in the neighborhood around there was quite fun. In my memory, I played outside a lot in front of the building, and then actually one of my first bestest memories is in the summer of 1969. Kos and my mom and a couple other friends had rented places in Fire Island in Ocean Beach, and we spent the summer out there. And cutting a long story short, when we came back into New York and when we got back into 801, that summer of 1970, our good friends on the 5th floor, the Johnses, Jeannie and Ronnie and their 3 kids, went somewhere, I don't know where, and I think sublet their apartment to a family, the McKays, who was the mother and 3 kids. The oldest was...
And I'm going to pause it a minute.
Mm-hmm. So, where was I? I actually want to backtrack 1 minute before we went to Fire Island. We spent 1 year living in Kos's parents' house in New Hope, Pennsylvania. That I just have some vague, not so vague memories of, that were a lot of fun. This was for us, this was the country. This was deep country, even though it's really, I think, more probably the exurbs now is what they call it. And they had a big old Revolutionary era barn house that had a lot of stuff added on. Anyway, we stayed there. We were there for 1 school year. I went to 3rd grade there. And I just remember really enjoying it. You know, it was in the winter, we sledded, and, you know, I took a school bus to school. It was fun. Anyway, it was after that, the summer of '69, we went to Fire Island, Spent the summer out there. That was really cool. I lost my younger sister Sam when I was supposed to be watching her when my mom went to do something, and Sam wandered off and I wasn't paying attention, but we found her. And my mom beat the shit out of me, I'm sure. And then we moved back, and then in the summer of 1970, when the Joneses went somewhere for the summer, the McKays moved into their apartment, and the oldest sibling was Keith, who was exactly my age, and his younger brother Brian and his sister Liz, who's older. Between Liz is older, and so Keith and I were the same age, and we got introduced and we started hanging out, and then very quickly, because Keith was already friends with our videographer Joe, and at the time the only other one I knew was George Attard, because the four of us hung out a lot, and we would get together and play baseball cards and play, we didn't play stickball. I didn't play stickball yet until a year or so later when they moved out.
Before you
Yes.
get into this period, tell me about your parents. Tell me something that you learned from your mom, or she taught you, or that stands out in you. And same thing with I guess Kos. If there's anything that stands out.
Yeah. Well, I'll start with Kos just because Kos was obviously not the happiest person when we were young. He was a struggling writer, but the funny thing is, Kos was so much fucking fun. Like, he played with us. Like, we played wild games, and he was, for someone who, I don't even know that he ever wanted kids. I'm not even sure, but he sure was. He was fun. Kos was fun. What was that? Yeah, there were a couple games he used to play that I can't remember. One where he'd get under a blanket, make believe he was a monster, and chase us around the house. And my mom, I mean, I don't remember that my mom was particularly unhappy, but she could be rough. She was loving, but not very affectionate. My family wasn't very affectionate physically until later in life. But my mom, she used her hands. Mm-hmm. She used her hands on us.
I'm sure rightly so.
Probably. And I remember, like what I've learned, like with Kos, like if I learned anything from them that I can actually think of, it was, don't stay together when you're no longer in love. Mm-hmm. Now we were pretty poor. We were on welfare and had food stamps, and but I never felt deprived. Always had food on the table. Always, we had a great place to live, and yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't right now. At least in my, I'm not in the clearest of headspaces, but I would say that I definitely felt loved.
Okay.
I definitely felt loved, and I loved them. And when my younger sister, was born, I have to say I was kind of blown away because I had never seen a baby that I thought was attractive, and Sam was a fucking cute baby. And
are you referring to your own unattractiveness as a child?
Yes, from my mirror times looking in the mirror. And Gwen we always knew Gwen was going to be a mother. Gwen always loved children, always wanted to babysit. She babysat all the time. And
Andre, I think the African
child. Oh, yeah, yes. This guy remembers more than I do. So let me see. Yeah, I don't have a lot of I have a clear memory. Kos was a writer. He was a struggling writer. Hated working in, got jobs in the bar business finally, and hated it. But he would go in the back room. One of the back bedrooms in 801 was his writing room, and I can remember sitting outside the closed door of his room on the floor, Like, I think I had crayons and maybe I was drawing. And I remember really feeling sad. That was like the first feelings I can remember of something resembling depression. And turns out, I was told years later that I was actually using crayons to color on some of my mom's actual vinyl records.
And you wonder why she hit you.
Yes. And so then, as I got a little, started hanging out with a couple guys in the building. This is before I met Keith and Joe. Gene and Tim Harrison on the 9th floor. I hung out with them some, and
Brett.
You're not from 801. That was years later.
Oh, okay.
And Beck,
Beck has something.
if that's who you're thinking of.
That's
Beck was lived on the 1st floor of 801, and he wasn't nearly as interesting as Timmy and Gene, in particular Gene. Gene was a year or two younger than me, and Timmy was my age, but Gene was very adventurous, and I used to call him a monkey because that man could fucking climb. I couldn't believe how this guy could climb. He was a talented kid. It turned out. He was a really good artist too, and he's the one that originally got me interested in graffiti. But to not jump ahead too quick, so now let's say I'm 9-10 years old, 1970. I meet Keith, I meet Joe, I meet George. We get into playing baseball. Oh, we played baseball cards fucking hours and days at a time. And yes, they probably usually beat me most of the time, swipe me out, because they had like fucking shoe boxes full of cards, and I probably had like a half a shoebox. And then we started getting into playing sports. Like when Keith's family moved out, they found an apartment on 105th and Riverside, and I started going up there, me and Joe, and then I met some of the other people around. Like there was the McVeigh family that lived in Keith's building, and one of the brothers was our age, and they had siblings all up and down the scale.
Billy, and
Billy, Jonna, Robert, Susie. Was that it?
Yep. Robbie Ann.
Robbie Ann. Yes, of course. And so I used to go up to 105th Street, and we would play stickball out on the street in front of their building and break windows and get chased out. And I was never that good a hitter. I could not hit a pitched ball very well, but I could catch anything that came my way. I always could catch football, and.
I will remind you that we just saw some basketball video of you.
I caught. I just. Yes, that we'll cut some of those into this video. But yeah, that's when I started. That was when I really first started hanging in the streets. Away from 801. Was up at 105th Street. We would go. Then we started going down to Riverside and playing basketball.
Roll back to when you broke your arm.
The first time?
Yes.
So the first time I broke my arm was, which was just like a green stick fracture. I had been practicing one thing. 801. We lived on the 11th floor, and I ran up and down the stairs a lot because Gene the monkey, we would race up and down the stairs. And, I could see, I'd go 2 at a time. Then I'd try to go 3 at a time. And so when you got down the stairs at 801 to the lobby, the stairways changed. The 2 stairways came down to the half landing, and then it was one wide staircase that came down into the lobby. And that shit's not even there anymore. Now that I think, there must be. I don't remember it. Anyway, I was so proud. My mom and Gwen were like coming back from the store or something, and I stood at the half landing, and I said, "Watch me!" And I jumped all the way off the landing, and I landed and broke my arm. They took me to, I had it in the cast, whatever. But
What year was that? Do you remember?
Probably 1970, 71. Maybe 69. Yeah, I don't remember, but I was pretty young, and it was a couple years after that I broke it for real, the bad break. And that was when...
In Riverdale.
I had gone. So I went to PS 75 on 96 and Broadway, or 96 and West End Avenue. That's where both Gwen and I went to grammar school. They only went to 6th grade. The neighborhood school that you went to after that was called Joan of Arc. And Joan of Arc was kind of a rough public school. I mean, PS 75 was kind of, but it was like up to 6th grade.
Jesse
But-
went to PS 75.
Yeah. And so Gwen, when she graduated 6th grade, she went to Joan of Arc. And Gwen didn't quite have the street sensibility that I had. And she was scared, and of course she was by far in the minority. It was all black and Latino, and Gwen, I guess, got bullied like crazy at school. And she got jumped in the bathroom, and I think they put gum in her hair and all this crap. And at that point, my mom and Cass pulled her out and said, "You're not going back there." And they finagled something, I think maybe with Cass's parents, because they had some money, and they put her in a private school down at 66th Lincoln Square Academy, where she flourished and made lifelong friends, and it was great for her. So when I graduated from 6th grade at PS 75, they didn't want me going to Joan of Arc. And even though I was totally into it, I had street smarts, and a lot of my, anyway, I at that point I think I was maybe still white, but I was on my way to becoming Puerto Rican.
At some point, do touch upon religion and your parents and upbringing, if that.
Oh, well, my mom is from a Jewish family and considers herself Jewish, but not a practicing Jew, not religiously, but kind of culturally Jewish, I would say. And I just religion was just never meant anything to me. I had no interest in it. It was just not, it wasn't for me. So I never even thought of religion. And I actually hated going back to Philadelphia when my grandmother was still there, and we'd go sometimes for a holiday and eat at the Seder, eat a Seder and whatever. And yeah, it was something about it that just kind of turned me off. And part of that was because at that time, my grandmother and her other family, her brother Jerome, who lived in Philadelphia also, her sister Belle lived in New York, but they were basically bigots. Like they had never, they were closed-minded, money-focused bigots. They didn't have much money. Like my mom is what we called my grandmother, my mom's mother, and she was, I would say, solidly middle class. And I remember they lived on. Oh, this reminds me. They lived on a street called Rugby Street, and it was just row houses, like attached brick houses, 2-story. And I'd go and hang out there for days or whatever. And I remember when I was maybe 10 or 11, I was out there for a few days for some reason. And behind the houses, you have row houses on this street, you have row houses on the next street over, and in between was an alleyway. And somebody had put up a basketball hoop in the alleyway right behind their place to whoever it was that lived across the alley. And so I went out there one day. I was already into basketball, and there was a kid out there, maybe about my age, taller than me, skinny, that looked just like Joseph Mafia. He was a little darker skinned, but he so much reminded me of Joe. And so I went out to play basketball with him. We were shooting around, and whenever I went in for a meal or whatever, back to Mom's, she told me, "Don't play with him. You don't want to, I can't remember exactly what she added to that, but clearly she was a fucking racist bitch at the time. And it really kind of shocked me. And I never played with him again.
Tell us how you really feel.
And so anyway, that was that Rugby Street.
Okay. You was talking about the second break. And
So I didn't go to Dwight. I didn't go to Joan of Arc because my parents were nervous for me, even though I was. So they did the same thing. And actually, I think I got a partial scholarship, and then maybe they got the money from Casa's parents or who to get pay the rest of the, because it was a private school on the east side called Dwight York Preparatory School. I went there for 7th and 8th grade. You had to wear fucking uniforms, fucking jacket with a tie, but I remember when I got my bus pass, they gave out a bus pass to get, I had to take the bus across town. I felt like an adult. I could get on the bus by myself. I just flashed my pass, and that was pretty cool. But I really hated Dwight York because it was mostly a bunch of snooty rich kids, and I just didn't vibe with most of them. The nice thing is, because they were mostly white, I was the best athlete in my grade. I could play basketball better than any of them. And so anyway, I made some friends, and of course I had my first actually it wasn't really my first one, because I was in 6th grade when I had already been hanging out at 105th with Keith and Joe, and gotten to know Robert and Robbie Ann, and I think Joe had gone out with Robbie Ann before, and then she was so cute, and I had such the hots for her, and we actually got together for a little while, because that was my first French kiss, was with Robbie Ann, and it was in her apartment, and because me and her were sitting in the living room on the floor, her parents were sitting on the couch, and they were watching some classic old movie, and the song came on, and they started singing along. Love and marriage, love, like they were joking with us. And so Robbie Ann said, and she picked me up, and we went into her room. And that's where we kissed for the first time. It was my first French kiss. It was the most exciting thing ever. And then shortly after that, she left me and got with Keith.
Oh, really?
That was my first French kiss.
Well, for the record, though, I was with her beforehand. She wanted to, and she took me in her room and tried to kiss me. I wanted nothing to do with it.
Oh, really?
I was like, let's go play basketball or stickball. I don't know what you're doing.
Right. See, the thing, this is something I didn't bring up yet, but this is, I remember in first fucking grade, I already was a romantic. I just had these just romantic ideas, and being with a girl was all I ever. It wasn't even about sex, of course. It was just like there was something about romance and coupling, and because I remember my first crush, Marjorie. I don't remember her last name. She was a tomboy in my first grade class in PS 75. Anyway, and when the year I lived in New Hope and went to 3rd grade at the school in New Hope, there was another tomboy I fell in love with named Chrissy, I believe. Anyway.
Can I ask a question? I don't remember it clearly. I think it was the second time you broke your arm, and your mom and Cass were driving up to Riverdale
to the hospital, right?
And Keith, and they wanted to grab Keith, and I was with you, I think, at the time, and we went with them on a visit to you.
Oh, okay.
And that was the first time I met Gwen.
Oh.
And sat next to her in the car. And of course, I was all the way inside.
Crushing up against the window.
Crushing up against the window. But I'm sorry to make this about me, but
no,
I just wanted to. I couldn't understand if I knew you before.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
We had been playing stickball and all that shit.
Okay.
And we used to go out and play football, touch football. But so now, because I'm going to Dwight York, and I had a few friends, and one of my friends was named Brett, and his family was probably not rich, but way richer than us. Mm-hmm. They lived in Riverdale, in a nice apartment building. I think his father was a dentist, and they were very nice. And so I would go up there. I spent a few weekends up there because he had a sister. A twin sister. I don't even know if they were biologically the kids of their parents. I think they may have been adopted. I'm not sure. But they were paternal or fraternal, whatever, twins. And Carrie was her name. And she went to Dwight York also. And Carrie, no offense if anyone ever sees this, but Carrie was a slut. Yeah, at the age of 12 or 13. because and I don't mean even having sex, but she dated every guy in my class, and I was like the last one to date her. But this one guy, Jeffrey, who had gone out with her, and he used to go up to, he would spend the weekend up at Brett's, and he was telling me and this other guy one day, yeah, Carrie, you know, and she got me in her bedroom, and she showed me, you know, she took off her underwear, and all she had was peach fuzz. And so after Carrie and I were to get, you know, we were dating or whatever you'd call it at that age, and so after dinner, we had dinner, and then, you know, Brett and I were sleeping in Brett's room. He had two twin beds, and her bedroom was next door down the hall, and Jeff had told me she's gonna come in and get you after you go to bed, and she did, and she took me into her bedroom, and she did. She tried to seduce me. And it was the first time I tried to have sex. I was probably 13.
Whoa.
And I tried, and we were both naked. And I don't want to get too graphic, but I guess I will.
Too late.
Because I definitely was hard. And I didn't know what to do with it. I'm like sticking it. It wouldn't go anywhere. I was like, where's the fucking hole? It was so pathetic. But it was pretty funny. Anyway, that was it though. We never actually had sex. And so Brett. So another time I go up there to spend the weekend. And so like on a Saturday or something, his father was a member of a boat club. And so he took me and Brett to the boat club, and he was like schmoozing with his fucking doctor friends or whatever. And Brett and I think we were supposed to be like, you know, somewhere in another part of that building. But I was like, I feel like I may have already started graffiti. I think I may have already been doing graffiti. And so I was very kind of into exploring where I shouldn't be. So I started going to, I see a boathouse kind of thing that was locked. I thought it was locked, but I got inside the boathouse. Brett wouldn't go in. He was scared shit. And then I heard someone coming, an adult coming, and I took off. And it was raining out. It had just started pouring. And so I went running. And the direction, I don't even know what direction I was going, but the direction I was running, there was a fence, a chain link fence. Wasn't very high, you know, maybe 3 feet high, 3.5 feet high. And we were also into wrestling at the time. And all I was doing, and I was running pretty much full speed. And I'm like, I'm going over that fence the way Mil Mascaras comes into the ring, over the top rope. And so I did. I slowed down at the end. I put both hands on the top of the fence, swung myself over, and my left hand slipped off the fence. And my whole body came down on the top of the bar on the fence. Ouch. And I slid down on the other side of the fence. I was on the ground. And I remember lifting up my arm, and it was dangling from the middle. And I was kind of in shock. I didn't know it at the time, but I felt high. Like things looked weird, and I don't even remember the pain. But interesting because it was a boat club with a lot of fucking doctors and shit. I think Brett ran and got his father, and then somebody was there who was a doctor who found 2 pieces of wood and basically made a makeshift splint and put my arm in a splint and that's actually all I remember. I don't remember an ambulance or anything like that. And then my parent, you know, they called my mom, and she was all freaked out.
What year was this about?
Maybe 72, something like that. And so yeah, it was broken bad. It was both bones were completely severed, and they had to put metal plates in to put them back together. And then a year later, they took the plates out. And but yeah, that was a bad one. And actually, while I had that cast on with my broken arm, we all went up camping up into Maine. My mother's cousin Paul owns 260 acres of land, of wild land up in Maine, in northern Maine.
Paul Furman.
Paul Furman. He did. He was with Linda at the time, Linda DeRusi, and she had 3 kids that were about our ages. And so Cost, my mom, Paul, Linda, me, Gwen, and Sam, and Teddy. Teddy, who's the middle, what was the daughter's name? Betsy.
Betsy.
And Teddy was the older brother. Peter Dobson.
Oh, right.
So they were the three of them. So we all went camping out there. My mom couldn't. I don't remember this, but my mom says, "Yeah, she had to leave a week early because she couldn't take it." But we're camped out, and one of the times that you don't remember feet. You used to just playing with feet. You were feet, like you were playing. You used to do some stupid shit, and so I was doing that with Betsy, and I was totally thinking, romance. It never happened, but Teddy, the older brother, who was my age, I think, he was going through a real. I think we were 13 at that time. He was going through a really obnoxious period, and we went to the supermarket, pulled into the parking lot. We were all getting out of the car to go in the store, and Teddy really pissed me off, and I fucking bashed his head with my cast. He was never nasty to me again. And years later, actually, I spent some time with him. That was pretty cool.
Yeah,
But
I liked him. Yeah, he's pretty cool.
Yeah. So that was that broken arm. And it was, whatever. And
All
so then now at the age of 13, I'm well into graffiti by then. Joe and I were we were into it. We had markers. We were tagging in the buildings or whatever, but we really wanted to go to the one tunnel and do real graffiti. And we ran into George Attard and Steve Ducey, who were they were really tight at the time. And Joe and I were talking about going to the one tunnel. And George was like, you full of shit. You're too scared. You wouldn't go. We're like, let's go right now. You want to go? And I think George was shitting bricks when he saw we were serious. But the four of us went. It was the first time we ever went to the tunnel. And
Of all the people to go with.
I know! Because they had no interest in graffiti.
Yeah.
But it was just the excitement or whatever. And so the four of us went to the fucking tunnel. And I'll never forget. Get off at 145th Street at the back of the train. You walk back the end of the platform. Walk down the steps into the first time I walked into those tracks. And the platform is up like this high to my face. It was exciting. It was scary, but it was exciting. And then when we walk into the tunnel and you're next to these parked trains and they're fucking massive. It was crazy. But now, and I've written about this in my memoirs. Mm-hmm. Because I love. So the four of us get in, we find a train, and I forget how we actually got in one of the cars. Mm-hmm. And then Joe gets the conductor's booth open. And we're all kind of huddled around there, and Joe's inside the booth because we want to turn the lights on. It's fucking dark as hell. So I think Steve was a smoker. Mm-hmm. And so Steve had matches. And so Joe was like, okay, light a match and hold it. Let me see. And so we kept lighting matches. I think Joe was inside. I was just outside, and they were right behind me. So I think I would light a match and hold it, and Joe. And then finally, I think it might have been the last match. It might have just been me dramatizing it in my head, but it was like the last match. Light it up. And Joe said, and it goes out. Joe said, I think I got it. And he flipped some switch, and the fucking train started up. And it was the loudest fucking noise I ever heard. And he immediately shut it off. But it took like a minute or two before that thing, kind of shut down. And we all took off and headed back to But that was our first trip to the tunnel. That was exciting. That was fucking exciting.
And we basically did vandalism because I don't even think I had a real name back then. And
Bra 50?
Bra 50, yeah. Yeah, thanks for getting that on video. Appreciate that.
Well, it's on fucking like the Writers Corner website or whatever. You talked about it.
Right.
But because Joe lived at 50 Manhattan Avenue, and so Bra, he was such a fucking.
Am I recording now? No.
So where were we?
Keith, close the door to the bathroom, please. All right. The graffiti years. You were talking about.
The getting started graffiti, yes, and I know there's too much. There's too much there. What can I say about the graffiti years? It was some of the most exciting times. Going to the tunnel, then exploring other train yards, stealing paint. Yeah.
What did you write? And about when did you start?
I started writing.
Talk about some of the people that
influenced, yeah. So I mentioned Gene Harrison lived on the 9th floor at 801. Gene was a really good artist, and I'd seen sketching he had done, both actual sketches but also graffiti. I'm trying to think, what was his name? He never tagged on the subway or anything, but he wrote something like Jade, I think. Anyway, I saw all these things that he had done on paper, and they were fucking good. He had great 3D and shadows and all kinds of stuff. And so on 103rd Street and West End Avenue was outside of the buildings on the four corners of that intersection were always people hanging out. Older, a little bit older than I was. And one of them was a guy older than me who also happened to date Robbie Ann McVeigh. And his name was Lenny McGurr.
So the entire Upper West Side dated Robbie McVeigh. We've established that.
And Lenny, I found out from, maybe it was Gene, I don't remember, but Lenny had started this graffiti group with his best friend Mark Edmonds, who wrote Ali. And they started a group called Soul Artists. And, it was my neighborhood. So I was like, I want to be in this group. And I went to Lenny one day and I said, I want to be in SA. He says, make me 3 pieces on paper. And if they're good enough, you get in. So I go and I make 3 pieces on paper. At the time I was writing Sneak 1. Remember? Mm-hmm. And so I did, got some markers and did a Sneak 1, and I showed it to Gene. I was like going to my artistic reference or whatever, and Gene, he was like, no. And I said, well, I want to be able to do good 3D like you do. He says, well, then you should pick a name that has letters that are easy for you to do 3D. And I was like what? And he says, how about LTD? I was like, what the fuck is that? He says that's limited. It's in certain companies' names or what. I didn't even know. So I'm like, all right, an L and a T. And I said, well, the D is rounded. That makes it a little harder. But so he showed me how to do 3D on LTD. And so I started working on my 3 pieces for Lenny. And of course, the markers that we used back then were water-based. And I had dripped water. Some water had dripped on maybe all 3 of them. I don't remember. And I guess I didn't realize it till I got up to 103rd and showed them to Lenny. And he basically laughed at me and said, you got to do better. So I did. Then I guess I found some markers that weren't water-based. And I did 3 more. And he liked them. I got in. I mean, it didn't mean anything. I didn't even know what it meant. I didn't even know at the time that means, you write essay next to your name. I was just like, yes, I'm in the neighborhood writing group. Anyway, Gene was a big influence there. And I actually met several writers through Gene. I don't even know how he got to know them because he wasn't a writer. I met, I don't know if I should use real names. I met Moses 147 and Patch 147, who were brothers. Patch was about my age. Moses was a few years older. And I don't know why they were friendly with Gene, but I remember meeting them at 801 at Gene's place. And it turns out that Moses, the older brother, was the king of the Broadway line. He was like the biggest graffiti artist in that was in my world. And Joe, I don't remember exactly how we all got hooked up, but Greg Moses,
Greg
Gale, we started hanging with Greg, and he was really showing us the ropes, how to steal, where to steal from, how to get. He already had, I think, the keys. He had the skeleton key for the train, for the actual subway cars. He had the M1 or M5 key that got us in the locks where all any of the exit only, like on 104th and Broadway, there was an exit only from the 103rd Street station that was, it had a turnstile that only went one way and a gate that was locked. And every locked gate in the MTA system apparently used the same key. And so we had those keys. I think I have to pay Greg $1 or something for the key. And yeah, and then I don't remember if Greg was with us when it was the first time I went up to the 242nd train yards inside where they did the work, and we raided the engineers' fucking lockers, and we got lanterns, we got vests, we got rings of fucking skeleton keys. It was great, and so we were into it. We were so into it. Joe was probably a little more serious about it than I was, and but we stole a lot of spray paint, and Joe used to leave his shopping bags full of spray paint under my bed at 8:01, so his mom wouldn't beat the shit out of him. And and we would go to the tunnel, and we went to a lot of different. I know eventually Joe actually went to a lot more yards and tunnels than I did, but I remember, gosh, what yard? Okay, the one tunnel on 145th, the 1 yard, the Van Cortlandt yard on 242nd, the AA tunnel on 168th, around 168th. There was a D yard up on like 204th, I think. Might have been in the Bronx. Of course, a famous one, the New Lots yard, down in Brooklyn. I didn't get to the 3 yards, the famous 3 yards, until Cliff and Fat Cat, which was a little later. So at the time I started writing, Moses was the king of the ones. And Joe was dating my sister Gwen. And Moses was a good-looking guy. I mean, Joe was too at the time. But Moses was older, and for some reason, I guess Gwen was interested in him. And Gwen started going out with Moses. And Joe and Moses started having a battle in the subway, in the trains and the stations about Gwen. And it was hysterical. Because this was when the song was out, the song by Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, The Love I Lost Was a Sweet Love. And so Joe wrote, I think in the 96th Street station, The Love I Lost Was a Sweet Love, whatever. And next thing you know, a few days later, I see a tag from Greg. Finders, keepers, losers, weepers. I found the love you lost, and now I'm going to keep her. And then I think Joe had a response. I don't know. It was pretty funny. It didn't last very long.
Payback.
What's that?
The Big Payback.
The Big Payback
by James Brown.
Yes. Oh no, it was pretty good. But eventually, Gwen got back with Joe, and but it was great. I remember going to the tunnel with Joe and Greg. We had stocked up at the Grand Union on 100th and Columbus on like soda. I got the chocolate chip cookie dough, the prepackaged. I think Greg had actually gotten a couple quarts of Old English 800 because he was into that shit. And we went to the tunnel, and I'm pretty sure we stayed in the tunnel all night.
We slept there.
Yeah, inside the trains, and we fucking munching out, and yeah,
Drinking.
it was that was funny. And another time, I think it was when we went to a movie. Greg, Gwen, Joe, and I went to the movie. It was in the night, maybe the Riviera or the Riverside Theater, and I forget what movie it was, but Greg had snuck in a bottle of Old English, and I'd never saw this before. He turned that bottle up and opened up his throat, and the bottle was gone. He downed the entire bottle like that. I know Joe got. And I don't think it was that time, but there was some other time that he finally got me to drink some. And I went home and puked all over my mom's couch. And so graffiti. What else? And then Greg started phasing out of graffiti. He was, we didn't really know what happened. We heard maybe he was in jail at the time. Maybe, I don't know. So, and Joe, who was definitely, more into it than I was in terms of, he was a dedicated graffiti writer. I was a little less so. And Joe started getting up like crazy. And Joe was becoming a king. And then we started seeing, it wasn't as much on the Broadway line, but on the 2s and 5s, and probably the 3s and 4s, which was the 3 yard, was this Cliff 159. And I don't know how we ended up meeting Cliff. I'm sure you probably did first. And so we started, I went riding with, in fact, I remember going with Cliff. I don't know why, it was just me and Cliff, and we were way up in Riverdale, up near the top of the one line, and we were at the 225th Street station, I believe. And up there's only there are 3 tracks, the 2 local tracks that run, and there's one in the middle, what they call the layup track, where they would park trains when they were, out of service or in between rush hours. And there was a train parked in the middle, and Cliff had 2 cans of spray paint on him and jumped down into the tracks middle of the day and went up there and did what we would now call a throw up. Just a quick outline and a quick fill in. It was wacky. And he put a number on it. It was the first time I had seen that. And it was like number 500 something. And I was blown away by how quickly he did it and how smooth he was. I was like, damn, no wonder this man gets up. And Cliff became the king of the city at that time. And but Joe and Cliff were going at it too. Joe was trying to compete with him, and there were a couple incidents with myself and Cliff, because finally, oh, wait a minute. Everyone knows me as Laz. Here's why. So back then, I would refer to Hopi as my moms, or that's Casa as my pops. That's how we said it, for whatever reason. Moms, my pops. And Gwen and my mom used to call me Lar, L-A-R. And Greg heard and like probably was laughing, oh, Lar, Lar, Lar. And then he added the S like moms and pops and made it Lars. And that became Laz. And I liked that. And so I decided that was going to become my graffiti name. Now, Cliff, the king of the...
And let's not forget that LTD, everyone started calling you Little Tiny Dick.
Or Larry's Tiny Dick, or yeah. And then I would come back with Larry's Tremendous Dick.
Yeah.
And so
Moses.
No, Cliff. Mm-hmm. And so I started writing Laz. Well, Cliff's, most writers had a backup name, like a secondary name. Cliff's backup name was Paz. Paz 2, P-A-Z. Well, he saw me writing Laz. He would see my name Laz, and he was fucking pissed. He thought I was biting his name. And he shows up at 8:01. He had obviously been there before. And comes up and starts getting all loud with me. What the fuck? And I'm explaining, no, Laz, that's my name, I forget, nothing really came out of that. But sometime not that far later than that, Joe and I had been at the tunnel, and we did a double cloud together, Bone and Laz. And apparently, and I really don't remember this, although now I can kind of see, back then, they would try to clean the trains, but it was barely, like it wasn't clean. It was very faded. And I guess this car had been done like that, but what had been on it before was a Cliff piece. And so Joe and I did this double cloud, and my piece was over Cliff's old name. And I really don't remember seeing that. I really don't. Joe has said in the past that you thought I did know.
I think we started our piece
and then
realized that there was no way we can finish the piece without going over his name. So we decided to go over his name, right, and extend it so it's fully covered. It
was fully covered. We do, well, it turns out that subway car happened to be what we call a married car, where there used to be sometimes 2 subway cars that were always together. And these were married cars, and so the numbers of the cars, which I would have never thought to look at. Well, Cliff fucking knew from the fucking married cars that I had gone over his name. And he was not happy. And he showed up at 8:01 with his boy Fat Cat. And it just so happens that day Ralph Pooh was with me at 8:01. We were up at 8:01 getting stoned, and the doorbell rings, the downstairs buzzer, and it's Cliff fucking going livid on my ass. And so I'll be right down. So Ralphie and I go down. and we're right in front of 801, and Cliff is like, "You went over," and he pushes me in the chest. Now Cliff was, I'm sure, a year or two older than me, and definitely taller than me, but he was a scrawny fucking dude. I was not scared of him physically. But it didn't matter, because Ralphie was right next to me. And so Cliff pushed me, I backed up a step or so, and Ralphie, bam, hit him in the nose with a punch that broke his nose. Or at least Cliff thought it was broken. And Cliff was like, "Oh shit!" And he turned around and ran up West End Avenue. And Ralphie took off after him. And I'm standing there with Fat Cat. And Fat Cat is like, "Yo, Laz, your friend is crazy." I was like, "Yeah, he is." And so like 10 minutes later, here comes Ralphie and Cliff walking back. And Cliff walks up to me and apologizes. and an interesting extension to that is not that long after that, Tacky told me, I have no idea where he heard this. Tacky comes and by this time I'm already hanging on 99th Street in the new park. So I'm with a new different crowd. I'm phasing out of graffiti. I was much more into like getting high and other things at the time. But Tacky had gotten word from someone that Cliff was bringing his crew down to kick some ass. They were coming down from the Bronx, and it was going to be at the 103rd Street station at noon I think it was a Saturday, I'm not sure.
I remember this.
Yeah, and I was like, wow. Well, Ralphie was with me when Tacky told me that. So Ralphie gathers a crew to go to the 103rd Street station on that Saturday. And
We had bats.
you guys will remember, because the guy that as soon as I knew he was there, I was not worried. Preacher. Preacher was going. And there was a whole lot, Big Jesus that used to hang in 103rd, that he used to come to 99th with Ralphie, and his buddy Danny. These were two massive dudes. And I think Victor Balashak was there, and David, and a few of the 99th Street guys. But it was mostly Ralphie people he had gathered. And we go to there were bats, chains, knives. I don't think there were any guns unless they were hidden. And we were ready for a rumble. Little old me, I'm like, I wasn't scared because I'm like, look what I got. Shit. And so we fucking waited for hours and they never showed. So, and while we were there, because we were kind of spread out on the uptown track, because we knew they were coming down from the Bronx on the 2, they'd have to get on 96 and come up onto 103rd. And so yeah, we just waited there, and boy, people, when they came in to the 103rd, when they came downstairs to the platform, they saw that crew, and they went back up and waited upstairs for the train. People were scared. It was a scary crew. And little old me, I'm sure I was the youngest and smallest dude there. Anyway, so yeah, graffiti days were pretty fun, I have to say. Was some of the best memories of my life. And my favorite piece that I ever did, well, I had two favorites. One of them, when I left, so I went to Dwight York, that private school, for 2 years. And it was those 2 years I was doing graffiti, I think, the whole time. The last part of my last year there, I was going out with this Indian girl named Sari, S-A-R-I. Very cute. And Tacky had met her. I was real tight with Tacky at the time. And Tacky used to come over to my school. Oh, I have a story on that one that I'm going to have to tell. I'm sorry if I'm going on too long about this time frame.
Yeah.
But Sari, so when I finally left Dwight York and I knew I wasn't going back, I was going to Brandeis, the high school in my neighborhood. And I was I don't know why I knew I was never going to see Sari again. Like we were from different worlds. We only ever saw each other at school. But I was just heartbroken. I was moping around 801 that whole beginning of that summer, and Tacky kept coming over and like, yo, Laz, snap out of it, blah, blah, blah. And finally, he took me to meet some people that he had been hanging out with, that Ralph Poo had been hanging out with on 99th Street between Amsterdam and Broadway, and the new park up on Amsterdam there. And that was Yeah, that was the beginning of my, like, I would say that's the beginning of me becoming a man, was starting to hang out with that crowd. And, but one of the last times I went, and I think I actually went with Tacky. Tacky and I had gone to the tunnel together, and I made a double cloud, Laz and Saz, for Sari. And it was nice. It actually came out pretty nice. And,
Don't remember that.
you don't?
No.
Yeah. And Tacky liked it. And then the other one, which was more like at the very end, was one of the last real pieces I did, was kind of I think it was a whole car, but just window down. Because at some point I changed my graffiti name from Laz to O-H exclamation point. I have no idea why. I have no idea. I was writing O, and I did a serious whole car piece. O dash, don't be a fool. I mean, I remember why did I pick that phrase? Because that fucking song was popular at the time. Billy, don't be a hero, don't be a fool, or something. For some reason, that was in my head. I never planned anything, and that's what I wrote. But it was a nice fucking piece. Anyway, and I think Tacky was with me that time too.
So your graffiti names were Sneak One.
Sneak One, LTD, Laz. Oh, that may have been it.
Okay.
And of course, because then I started, was trying to learn from Cliff. And I would start trying to do throw up to get as many as I could instead of making them look nice. Because I started numbering them too. I think I may have gotten to 300 total. Just for reference, I think Joe had 600 something.
I don't remember.
And I think, well, now if you look at graffiti history and people like Blade are talking about 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 pieces. But they were writing well into the 80s too.
They wrote for decades.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, the great graffiti. I loved them. Loved those times. It was great.
So what's next on your agenda, and about what time are you transitioning?
So
I mean, not transitioning that way. Although,
yes, because I was a woman. Actually, it was the spring of 1975 that I remember going to the tunnel for the last time. Because I had already been hanging out it was the summer of 74 that I started hanging out at 99th, what I'll call 99th, and the New Park. And, Tacky and Ralphie introduced me to a bunch of people there, the Balashaks, David and his family, Rosa, all these people. And so I was in a totally different headspace. That was my first phase of really getting high a lot. And of course I was trying to fall in love. And was falling in love every other day. But one spring day, I think it was a Friday, I probably cut school, and I had 3 cans of spray paint left. And they happened to be my favorite colors, a red, a yellow, and a black. And I happened to have taken some acid that early in the afternoon. But I had told myself I wanted to go to the tunnel and finish these cans. And it may have been the only time I went to the tunnel by myself. I don't remember.
on acid? Are you crazy?
I know. It was interesting. But I did. I went to the tunnel. I fucking, made a couple pieces of whatever the fuck. And then I left my cans there. And that was the last time I ever wrote graffiti that I can think of. And after that, I was phasing into more hanging in the streets. Drugs, girls, little bit of, couple burglaries, shall we say, that Tacky and Ralphie tried to get me involved in. But yeah, not hanging at 99th is where I really would say I became a man. Not just because I lost my virginity, but
who was that to?
Rachel. She was a redheaded Puerto Rican girl that Tacky introduced me to. And we had a clubhouse on 99th Street. So David Myers lived on the second floor of 206 West 99th, which had his apartment, because his mother had moved out to a few blocks away with her boyfriend, and their apartment became a clubhouse. And everyone hung out up there. People from the New Park. I mean, that was a serious party place. And David and Carol, his sister, and Johnny, his younger brother, lived there. And then his older brother, Robert, got out of the Navy and came home, and that's when he didn't want everybody hanging out there. So they talked to the super of the building, and there was an empty apartment in the basement. And somebody, I think it was David, convinced the super to give us the key to the apartment, and we said, we'll fix it up a bit and clean it up and let us use it as our clubhouse. And he agreed. And so that was a clubhouse for a while. And there was a bedroom, and that was the bone room. and Rachel got me in there and took my virginity. And she was not a virgin. And yeah, we hung out down there for a couple years probably. And I was very into, mostly pot, but I got seriously into acid. Loved acid. And I got actually surprisingly into angel dust. Angel dust was big at the time. I used to ride my bike up to 113th and 5th Avenue. Was the only place I know I could get reliably good angel dust. And you'd keep buying in the little manila bags like you'd get a nickel bag of pot, but it was a smaller bag. And it was $10 for like a tiny bit, but all you needed was a tiny bit. And Tacky and I would just, roll it in with some pot. I loved the high. I really did. And so anyway, I was big into drugs. And until, oh, wait a minute though. Sorry, I'm missing, in the summer of 1975. One of my best friends at the time was a guy named Cisco. And Cisco's older brother, Eddie, Savage, everyone called him Savage, was in a band. And Eddie's band was hired to play on a disco boat ride. And it was the Dayline boats. Big, 3 or 4 decks, like thousands of people. And I had never, disco, I loved the music. I liked hearing the music, but I didn't know, But we went, 5 of us went. Victor was with Gwen at the time. Gwen was dating this Victor Balashak. Marvela. Do you remember Marvela?
I remember the name.
She was kind of from the neighborhood, but she didn't hang around a lot. She had gone out with Victor at one point. Anyway, Victor, Gwen, Marvela, myself, and Tacky went. Even for some reason, Cisco didn't go. Like, he never got a ticket. I don't know what happened. But we went to this boat ride, and so early, like maybe 6 or 7 o'clock, me and Victor split a hit of acid, a hit of blotter acid. Then Tacky and I go back to 801 to get dressed. We showered, got dressed up for the big night out, and me and him split a hit of acid. So I had taken twice the amount of acid. And so we went down to the boat ride, and it was really cool. But I have to say, for the first probably 3 hours, I was having a hard time, because that was the first time I ever had a really heavy trip. I mean, I had taken enough acid to really be tripping my balls off. And Tacky and I, even though he hadn't taken as much as me, he was also like, we were both kind of nervous about how we felt. We didn't, and it was scary for a while. But then by the time it came down enough, I was able to enjoy it. And the top deck of the boat was where there was a disc. Eddie and his band played on the middle level. But at the top, there was a disco DJ with the disco lights out in the fucking New York sky on a summer night in the Hudson River. It was fucking nice. I was tripping out on that music. And that experience changed my relationship with music. The acid, particularly. That's when I was like, wow, the bass is the instrument. And I had already been into funk, but I heard it very differently under that influence. And that was it. I was done. About a month later, Tacky and I decided to go check out a disco. And he found some disco in the village called Club 82. It was on West...
You're back up.
So, I guess I was talking about when after the boat ride, Tacky and I, we were like being pulled into the disco scene.
Club 82.
So we went to Club 8. Tacky found the club. So we went down to... we did a bunch of acid. We were tripping balls, and we go to Club 82, and downstairs. I mean, I'm sure we shouldn't have, age-wise. There's no way we should have been there, but we went, and I was so fucking high. I literally never got off the wall. I don't think I was back against the wall, and there was kind of a loungy area, like carpeted with booths and tables, and then there was a dance floor in the middle, and the DJ was behind the dance floor, and I was like directly opposite the DJ, but all the way against the wall, because there was a light show, and the dance floor was lighted, and I was just tripping out on the music and the dancing and the lights. I mean, I didn't need anything else. Tacky was a little more like, I don't know if he danced, but he wandered around and he was doing his thing, but I was just like stuck on the wall. In fact, I was so high that I'm standing there, I'm kind of like just looking at the light show in the dance floor area, and off in my peripheral vision, there's like a little cluster of maybe 3 or 4 people here talking. Maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 feet away. I couldn't hear, it was too loud. But they were obviously together. And out of the corner of my eye, I see someone, boom. And I look over and somebody is literally just fallen over. And I'm looking like, oh shit, were they on acid? And it made me so paranoid. And I must have looked so freaked out that somebody walked from ahead of me. They walked over to me. I'm looking at this person laying on the ground, and they asked me, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Why are you asking me?" I don't even think I said anything out loud, but I was just like, yeah. But it was a lot of fun. And so that day when we left there, because I think they closed at 4, Tacky and I walked home from the village. And I remember we were still tripping. And we got to a point in the village where West 4th Street and West 10th Street cross each other. And I was like, whoa! I'd never been to that corner.
Mind blown.
Hell yeah! Mine was blown. Anyway, yeah, that was fun. And then actually that winter, Tacky and I went to another disco in Midtown. And then the next summer, 76, there was another disco boat ride. Eddie band wasn't playing on it, but Tacky and I were like, yeah, we gotta go. And we went on that boat ride. And that's actually, I remember, that's when, even though the album had been out, but Mothership Connection was the big thing. And I remember up on the disco outdoor level, when they played fucking Tear the Roof Off the Sucker, I was gone. I was so absorbed by the music. It was great. So anyway, a year after that, or maybe it's in the spring of 77, Cisco, my good friend, told me he was going to go on a Saturday night. He was going down to this party in the village because there was this girl who I knew.
Watch my hand.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, you mean one?
Yeah,
You have
every
a
once in
question?
a while. No, when you have look at the camera every once in a while.
Oh, okay. I know, I do tend to look off into the nowhere land.
Me too.
So, shall I go?
Yes. Go.
Cisco told me there was a girl he had such the hots for, this girl named Maria, who lived on 26th Street, who was very pretty. She was a big girl. But she had such a pretty face. And Cisco was like, yo, Maria's going to this party in the village, and I'm going to go. Let's go, lads. I was like, cool, let's go. And we got some herb, we got some acid, and he said, yeah, the party starts at midnight, and it goes till whenever in the morning. I was like, cool. So we did some acid, we take the train down, we walked there, it's a block south of Houston on Mercer, basically Prince and Mercer it's on, and we get there, and when we get there, I find out, well, you can't just go in, it's actually a private party. You have to have an invitation. But Cisco's like, no, I'll get us in. And so Cisco goes up to people, because there's clusters of people standing outside waiting to go in. They're probably waiting for people with an invitation. And Cisco goes up to everyone. Yo, you got room for 2 more? You got room for 2 more? No. 4 o'clock in the morning, we're still out there. We're laying on a car, up against the windshield. We're tripping, smoking a joint. I was like, hey, it's better than hanging in the New Park. and then at like a little after 4, this couple comes walking around the corner from probably the R on Prince and Broadway, I guess. And Cisco runs up, and the guy is like, yeah, come on. He took us in, and that was my introduction to the Loft. And my life definitely changed that night. And,
Describe it.
oh man. So there's a guy named David Mancuso who lived in this loft. And he threw parties every Saturday night. Big parties, you know, you could fit a few hundred people anyway. And it was invitation only. And he didn't call it a club. And it was not a membership card. It was an invitation. He was kind of a hippie, you know, but he was a master of manipulating the mood of the people at the party. He knew what songs to play, and yeah, he wasn't a great technical DJ, but he knew the music and he knew the people at his party. And this place was the most mixed, diverse crowd I had ever seen. And it was like, I walked in there, and you walked in through this, like, it looked like the back door to a restaurant's kitchen, you know, with garbage cans by the door and unmarked door, 147 Mercer. And you went in, and the door, and standing in the door is this like 6'6" dude with a turban. An actual like Sikh or something, and his name was Sultan. At least that's what people called him. And he's the person that would make sure you had your invitation, and you'd go in. And so the guy brought me in Cisco, and we had to tell him our names because you know you weren't supposed to bring in people you didn't know. So we introduced each other, blah blah blah. Got in past Sultan. Then there's the membership desk where they, you know, check, check the member. You're the, these are your guests. We're cleared to go in, walk down a flight of stairs, and to the side here was a bank teller window, like literally, and we the bars and everything, and there's this woman behind it, and there was it was $5.99 to get in. He charged $5.99. Started as rent parties, and I paid $5.99, and there was a pile of pennies there, and a little sign in front of it that said, "A penny saved is a penny earned." And I found out years later that the woman behind there, her name was Penny. Penelope. Anyway, so then you walk into the downstairs of the loft, which was a big room. There was kind of a coat check area, which, I mean, it was summer, but I couldn't understand why there was people checking shit in the summer. It's because people came there and changed clothes. Because people went there to dance. And I mean to sweat and work out. And I'm just like, I mean, I was in like shorts. I was in my normal summer gear. And Cisco and I go in. And, you know, downstairs, I look around. And, you know, there's a dance floor. But it's pretty sparsely populated. People are just kind of standing around, smoking joints, passing around remember Locker Room and Rush? And there's a big bar. An actual wooden bar. And there was all kinds of snacks and drinks on it. You know, munchies and apple fruit, and they had just put out a big thing of mac and cheese, and you know, big bowls of water and fruit punch, and I was digging it, but I was like, oh, you know, cool. And there were couches at the far end, and people are it felt so relaxed. The difference between that and Club 82 was like night and day, and so then you go up another set of stairs. And you get to the main fucking party room. And I mean, you get up there, there's a hallway, whatever, but then you walk through this big archway, a double archway, and here's this big fucking room. And the music is blasting, but it was the best sound system I ever heard to this day. It was crystal clear. I was stunned at the whole speaker setup was insane. I mean, this guy, David Mancuso, started a sound revolution in disco. That to this day, that's how they do sound pretty much. And I can't even describe it, because I walk into this room and it's pretty packed, and it's gay and straight and black and white and Latino and Asian, people dressed in everything from dress up to like nothing. And not literally nothing, but it felt like a really cool house party where I didn't know anyone, but it felt like everyone was immediately my friend. That's really what it felt like. Because people were, it was such a positive and supportive atmosphere. I mean, people would standing, cheering each other on, dancing. Yeah, go you go, girl! And he's talking to a guy. Because it was very gay. There was a lot of gay people. David was gay. And, but it was just so, the atmosphere blew my mind. I was shocked. And of course I started against the wall. That, just kind of bopping to the music, watching the dancers, seeing how like nobody's doing the hustle. People are just moving freestyle. And the music, I was loving the music. And again, we got in after 4. By like probably 7 o'clock, I was dancing on the dance floor. And I had never danced in my life in front of anybody or anything. I wasn't dancing heavily. I was just kind of moving and bop, but I didn't feel self-conscious. It was by the time he stopped playing, of course, they had to kick my ass out. There were always like a few dozen people that were there till the bitter end. And Cisco and I were there, and and then he opened, it's fucking daylight. It was probably 10 o'clock Sunday morning. And we were walking out, and I was like, Six, you better be back here with me next week because I need to get in. And I was too shy to like just go up to people I didn't know and ask to get me in. So for many weeks, Cisco had to get me in. But anyway, that was the beginning of a new chapter in my life that is to this day the one I have the most fond memories of.
How did the Paradise Garage?
Okay, good question. So I started going to the loft in early April because I remember when Cisco told me about the party that we were going to go to, it was April Fool's Day, and he was goofing me that he was going. He and Maria were getting married, and that's what he first said. But then I realized it was April 1st and whatever. So then Cisco and I went several times, quite a few times, and then I think Cisco's brother Eddie started going, and then who else? A few other people from the neighborhood started going, and including Tacky. I finally got Tacky to go, and so Tacky, of course, fell in love with it. Well, in like August, Tacky tells me, "Yo, Laz, there's a place in the village too that's open Friday nights. Let's check it out. It's called the Garage." I was like, yeah, let's do it. And his birthday was September 1st. And so we were going to go for his birthday. I don't think his birthday was on a Friday, but it was that week. And so me and Tacky headed down to the Garage. And it was kind of a similar scene outside, a lot of people waiting. But here it seemed like there was a bit more of like a line. It wasn't just clusters of people standing. There were clusters of people, but there was also like a line of people waiting to get in the front door. And Tacky's asking people who can get us in, and finally somebody said, "Well, I got room for 1." And Tacky said, "You go, Laz. I'll get myself in." And I was like, "Yeah." And so we get on the line to get in the door, and we're standing there. It's going slowly, and like 10 minutes later, Tacky comes walking up with somebody else, and they go right to the door and in. So, but whoever it was somebody special, and so I got inside with Tacky, and actually Tacky was smart. So he had gotten the person that brought him in to sign him up for a membership right away.
Oh, okay.
And so I was like, who do I ask? Who do I ask? And so I forget who I asked. Oh, I know who I asked. There was a guy who I knew from the loft. A very gay dude. Really good-looking black dude who was a model. Really gay. Did I say that? But he was so fucking cool. I really liked him.
Is this your transitioning?
That was the beginning of my transition. His name was Jimmy West, and he spelled it Jimi. And because I remember he gave me a business card, and it was Jimmy West. I forget what it said, what his title was. But anyway, he was in love with me and Cisco. He always was trying to get us to let him. He wants to suck our dick, whatever. And because of course he thought I was Puerto Rican, because by that time I was Puerto Rican, and so he would always, "Yo, Larry, when you gonna let me suck that Puerto Rican Beecho?" I'm like, "Not today, Jimmy, not today." But I remember one time at the loft, not to digress too much from the Garage. This is when I knew that I had let go of all my inhibitions. The loft had so it was a big room, high ceilings, and there were 4 big pillars, monster round pillars, kind of, and around the pillars were these big snake pillows. And somewhere near each one of those was kind of a small platform box, a wooden box, that people would like sit on to rest, or some people would get up on it and dance. Mm-hmm. And one time, I was up on that box by myself, dancing, and I was working it. At least it felt like it. And Jimmy West comes walking up. I already knew him because he had gotten me into the loft several times by then. And Jimmy walks up with this gorgeous woman. And he's like, yo, can we get up there with you? I was like, hell yeah, come on. And the 2 of them got up, and the 3 of us danced. Mm-hmm. I was in ecstasy, I swear to God. And because first of all, that woman was so fucking gorgeous. And actually, there was one point at which I'm dancing with her and he's behind me dancing on me, and I didn't even care. I was like, yeah, and I turned around and faced him, and it was the most liberating experience, kind of adapting to the loft. It was so liberating. And anyway, so now I saw Jimmy West at the garage that first night, and I asked him if he could sign me up, if he was a member, and he was. And so he signed me up, and like 2 weeks later, I got my garage membership. Of course, I didn't have my loft invitation for another year. But anyway, so the garage, and at that time, the garage was completely under construction because they had big visions for this club. But at this point, there was this one room that was the party room. It was a big square, maybe, 75 feet on the side, or maybe a little more. But it was like, there was nothing to it. There was no decor. It was like, and there was, against one wall, was a horseshoe of, folding tables. And the DJ was set up behind there. He had his turntables and all his equipment. And of course I was tripping. And throughout the night, and I'm dancing, I'm like, yeah, I could get into this. It was very mixed. It was a little gayer than the loft, but it was still very mixed. And I danced with so many women that night. I was just like, yeah, this is the place. This is where I'm going to find my romance. But then I kept hearing people calling my name. And I was like, what the fuck? Turns out the DJ's name was Larry. And now he's probably the most famous DJ ever. His name is Larry Levan. He was like...
The DJ saved my life? No.
No. I don't know. Maybe they wrote that about him. But Tony would know he knew Larry Levan. And so yeah, anyway. So they had these... The parties were there, but there was this much bigger room that was completely... There were sawhorses and sawdust everywhere. And so we would, that's where we would go to, rest and, smoke and whatever. And for a while there, the garage was, and actually for a while, I did the garage Friday night and the loft on Saturday night. And I was still in high school. So I was like, and that's when somebody had turned me on to Black Beauties. So instead of, they're basically speed, 20 milligram biphenamine tab, diet pills, like real diet pills. Because Fat Freddy from the New Park, I think, must have had a prescription because he used to sell them. And the first time I had a Black Beauty, it's like, I took that shit, an hour before midnight, before I would get there. I was fucking speeding until Sunday night. Like, it was serious. But I loved it because then now I just need a little pot. And I stopped doing acid for the most part because I didn't want to mix them. But I did more than my share of Black Beauties. And why'd I bring that up? Freddie, because Freddie, the first night at the garage, we saw Freddie, Fat Freddie, LeBron, because Tacky saw him and whatever, and then I never saw... In fact, Fat Freddie is who got Tacky in.
Oh.
Now that I think of it. And that's who signed him up. Well, anyway, I never saw Freddie again the whole night. And I asked Tacky, I was like, have you seen Fred? He was like, I think it was Tacky that told me, I think he got kicked out because he was a drug seller. And that's one thing, both the loft and the garage, you could do whatever drugs you wanted, but don't sell them. and no alcohol and no selling of drugs. And he probably got busted selling drugs and got kicked out. But anyway, so yeah, the garage became my thing on Friday nights and Saturday nights, and then if you want to indulge me a little bit.
Yeah, sure. We have about 8 minutes left on this
Okay.
session.
Might have been just after New Year's of 77 to 78, I guess. And the garage had closed, I think, in November, because now they were going to push to get the big room finished and to really open up, because officially, I guess, they weren't technically open, and they had no name yet. They called it the King Street Garage, and
Was it an actual parking?
oh yeah, it used to be a parking garage. Where you walked in at the ground level, that was all big garage behind you. Then you turned around and walked up a ramp, that obviously where they drove up to the next level, and that became the famous ramp, the garage ramp, because they put lights on it, and that's where where you paid was at the top of that ramp,
Okay.
and so there'd always be a line at the ramp. Anyway,
Was it during the week? It was a garage, and then on
no, at that point it was no longer a garage.
Oh, okay.
And because they had bought it, and they were putting a lot of money into it, and so the big room was getting ready. They closed down and said, "We will let you know when we're reopening." And so I was like, "Oh fuck, no more Friday nights." Because little point is, the garage was absolutely a gay club, but Saturday night was the main night, and so they opened up Friday night and they called it mixed night. And so that's when, because if you were straight, you couldn't get a membership to get in Saturday night. I mean, they were a little obnoxious about it.
So how did you get one?
I had to suck his dick. And so they were closed. So now it's the loft, and by now the loft was there were too many people from my neighborhood going there. One of the things that really I loved about the loft was here was a place that I felt so comfortable and so at home, and yet I knew nobody pretty much. And when more people I knew started going, it started feeling a little different. It's like I don't know. So anyway, we go in. We're going to the Cisco and I probably went together. This was in the winter, and we go in, and somebody. I think by that time I had enough balls to ask somebody to bring me in myself, and so I'm going in. Cisco is somewhere else, and we get in. We get past Sultan, and we get to where they check your card, and the person behind the desk took this guy's invitation, ripped it up. Said, "Sorry, you're no longer a member. You can try again in, whenever, sometime in the future." And they were stunned. They were, "What's going on?" And they wouldn't fucking tell us why. And this was happening to a lot of people that night. A lot of people were losing their fucking invitations and getting kicked out, basically. So I'm back outside in front. Cisco is out a few minutes later, and I see a couple. Marilyn. There was a girl named Marilyn who used to go to the loft. That was my first loft wife. And Marilyn and her crew, I think she was gay. I never knew that for sure, but she was we danced together a lot. And Marilyn and her crew were outside, and me and Cisco, maybe a few other people, and we were like, "Shit, what are we gonna do now? It's Saturday. We don't have the loft," because we were all addicted to the loft. And somebody said, "Well, there's this place up on 18th Street called the Inferno. Let's go check it out." And so a bunch of us called 3 cabs. We went up to 18th and 5th Avenue, and there was the Inferno, which was like a regular disco kind of. It had a bar, 2 floors. And so we all went in. It was fucking empty. There were probably less people there when we got there than the crowd that walked in. And we were like, "Damn, this is." But then, the DJ started playing some decent music, and we're like, "Yeah." And I always loved having an empty dance floor because I got plenty of room. And so we got into it, and we were dancing 3, 2, and so the next week we go back. There's more people. Next week we go back, even more people. The 4th week, it was fucking packed. I have no idea why. That's when I said, nah, I'm gonna go try to go back to the loft. And the next week I went back to the loft, and all the other loft folks didn't come back for another week or two later. And yeah, so maybe that's the place to wrap it for now.
Okay.
I don't know.
Sounds good. You know, you became a man at the 99th Street Park. Go.
Oh, so yes, when I became a man, because well, first of all, it was the first place that I was really hanging out with girls, and girls that I was attracted to, and yeah, my romance fantasies, of course, took off at that point, and the music of that day, so many songs I used to either would make me cry, or I would sing them and try to sing them to Rosa or Julie, and yeah, I guess when I say
Julie Battleship?
Julie Balasek, and yeah, when I talk about say becoming a man, I mean, again, other than having lost my virginity, I think it was the first time that I was really kind of independent from my family, and able to just basically do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. And you know, aside from getting into drugs and fucking tripping on acid and starting to, you know, get into disco music and got really into handball and then paddleball, and really everybody there was older than me. And so I you know, that was another part of it, was just being around people that I saw as men. And was mentioned by our videographer, when I first started hanging out at 99th Street, I was on 99th, talking with some people, getting high, and Ralph Pooh and Gwen came walking down very fast from the New Park down 99th to where we were at the stoop of like 216, and we were like, what's going on? It was me and Tacky and I forget who else, and they were like, Victor and Veronica just got stabbed. And we were like, whoa. So we all ran up to the park, and I think by then the cop cars were there, and I think one of them was already on their way to the hospital, and I think Veronica was just getting shoved into a police car to get up to St. Luke's. And yeah, they were both in the hospital for weeks and touch and go, and they had surgeries. I think Veronica, and the guy who stabbed them, we knew, he was actually a member of the gang that Tacky was in, the Satan's Warriors, which was like the youth version of the Kings of Darkness that Ralph was in. And I knew most of those guys in the Satan's Warriors, and yeah, and Carlito was one of them, and he apparently had stabbed Victor. I don't know what started the fight, but he stabbed Victor, and then Veronica tried to jump in, and he stabbed her. And when he stabbed her, he went in and up with the knife. And it was like some little, I forget what knife it was, but it was some small knife, like a Swiss Army knife or something. And then he took off, and yeah, it was a big deal, needless to say. And but they both recovered, and they were both fine eventually. And they're yeah, just now I'm trying to think. I'm not sure I have much more like memory of why I say I became a man there, other than I was getting older. I was becoming independent as a young man, okay. And I felt like a young man and not a kid. Okay. And all the people I hung out with, of course, they were part of that. They gave me confidence. Whatever. And
is there anything else you wanted to add on the loft dance drug scene?
I mean,
and what time periods were they?
So I started going to the loft early '77. Went to the garage the first time in the fall of '77. Then I went to the garage every week until probably, well, when they reopened. They reopened in February of '78. That's when the new room was done, and now they had a logo and the official name, the Paradise Garage. I still have the letter where they sent me my membership. This club is now known as the Paradise Garage. And so that was early '78. I went to the garage regularly till probably sometime later in '79. And the loft I was going to most weeks also. And and then I kind of just, the garage had become way too big for me. It was, once the big room opened, the crowd, when it first opened, it was still great. I mean, Cisco and I just had such blasts there. I remember one time they were playing this one song by Voyage that sounds like a kind of a Scottish jig of some sort. And Cisco and I broke out into this fucking, arm around, grab your partner, like that, dancing around each other's arms, and everybody around us started doing the same thing. It was great. It was still a great party. But at some point it started getting too crowded, and especially on Friday nights, straight night or mixed night, it was attracting a lot of young straight guys that were looking to pick up women, and it just changed the flavor entirely for me. It no longer had that feel of a house party that's just everyone's friendly and loves each other, and it just became more of a hardcore thing. And so I slowly started, I kept my membership until mid '80s, but I only went a few times after that. And actually, that's why Ian and Chris wanted to hook me up with Claudia, because Claudia apparently had gone to the garage, but she had gone much later than I. She had gone in the later years, and anyway, when I met Claudia, I met Edel at the same time. So
how did you transition to the next phase of your life?
So I started working at Mellon's West in 1980, and I was still going to the loft regularly.
What were you doing there?
I was a waiter, trained by my sister Gwen, the best waitress. No, this was West. Mellon's West on Amsterdam and 76th. And I had been working at Gristedes supermarket for a couple years almost. But I had worked at the one on 68th, and I guess it was Amsterdam 10th maybe. I forget. But that was a really great period too, because I got the job because two of the guys from 99th worked there, and they got me a job, and then a couple other, it was Jesus' brother Charlie, David's brother Johnny, me, who else? There was somebody else also that, anyway, we had a blast, and I would stock shelves, I would do the register, I would go do deliveries, and of course I love doing deliveries because I'd go out and get stoned, and then come back, and I used to, when I was on the register, I used to pocket cash out of that register, and I never got caught. And but then the assistant manager of that Gristedes thought that I was wasting my life as a stock boy. He said, "You're too smart for this, blah, blah, blah." He got me transferred to a Gristedes on the east side where I was going to work in the meat department. So I was going to make more money packaging up the meat. And I was so devastated that it's like, you're making me leave my friends and this job I love. And after a week I quit. And that's when I went and, I guess I didn't go right to Mellon's. I was a busboy at the Ginger Man for a while, for like over a year.
Where was the
Ginger Man? Was in Lincoln Center. It's kind of a white tablecloth. They catered to, basically, Lincoln Center has, operas and dance and all that. So it catered to those crowds. And it was, and that's the time, the timing of when there were matinees and night shows. That's when it was really busy. And I enjoyed working there. But then at some point, Gwen told me that there was an opening at Mellon's West. And so I went up and interviewed, and that's when my real waiting career began. And very shortly thereafter, there was a girl that worked there named Christy, and Christy and I hooked up, and that's when I kind of started going to the loft a lot less, and eventually moved in with Christy. And there's some stuff I think I'm gonna best to leave out of here, just in case certain people see this. And so yeah, we started working at Melons, which is also, that's when I started drinking coffee, and that's when I started drinking any alcohol whatsoever. I was never into alcohol, but I'd have a drink there,
So how'd you get into technology?
so in the early when I was living with Christy on 91st Street, I had always been into, of course, music, and so stereos were such a thing for me. In fact, flashing back into the mid-'70s, Cisco and I used to walk up to 112th Street in Broadway, where there was a high-end stereo store called Tech Hi-Fi, and we used to just browse in that store for hours and oogle shit and talk about, this is what my system's gonna be. And they used to have these really nice glossy catalogs of all their equipment. And so we both had our catalog, and we'd be marking up pages, and we need $18,000 or whatever. Nothing ever, of course, came from it. But I was always into, and when I